Let me talk a little bit about this fella, and then we'll talk about some other stuff. So what I'm doing right now is a project to do digital identities for physical things. And physical things you could broadly divide into two piles, things which get worth less over time and things which get worth more over time. So because we're a startup and we don't want to go broke, we're focusing on things which are worth more over time, which initially means things like collectibles. And we're fortunate enough to have William Shatner be our first customer. And there will be a range of Star Trek and other Shatner memorabilia coming onto the Ethereum main chain in the next probably 3 months, possibly 6 weeks. And this is a test object. You can come and take a look at this. If you look for a document online called the Materium Manifesto, you can read all about the actual details of how this is implemented and the legal structures which allow us to make strong guarantees of provenance and authenticity. Now, before I got into the blockchain space, I spent about 14 years doing energy policy, large-scale refugee management planning, and worst-case scenario planning for a variety of governments. So why am I doing stuff with collectibles when the world is on fire, we're up to our neck in climate refugees? What exactly took me into the blockchain space? And the answer is, we need to get computers to deal with the real world properly. This is a very simple and naive thing to say, but at the end of the day, we've got 9 billion people. The normal model of the economy has left 1 billion people starving and 1 billion people fat, including myself. We've got an enormous amount of defense spending, most of which the militaries themselves say is misallocated. And we don't seem to know where anything came from, what it cost, or whether slaves were involved in its production. So what I want to suggest is that our handling of the material world is a total shambles. And that's what's producing the enormous amount of hassle that you see in things like deforestation. It's what's causing the topsoil erosion. It's what's causing things like climate change. That entire set of structures is being driven by the fact that we don't seem to be able to connect cause to effect in the physical world. You go to a shop, you buy something, you have no idea where it came from, you have no idea what it cost downstream, you don't know whether it left a lake of poison in some Chinese village where they manufactured it, you have no way of understanding the impact of your actions. And if we blind people to the impact of their actions, can we blame them for acting unethically? If you don't know what's really happening as a result of your lifestyles, how could you ever be expected to modify your life cycle? If we don't keep track of what's happening in the world, how could we ever expect to change what's happening in the world? Does this make sense? I mean, if you don't measure anything, how can you modify it? We're just guessing. So we've gone through centuries of trying to get better control of things. It's kind of one of the hallmarks of Western civilization is we try and achieve control. We got really effective control of information over centuries of librarianship. Librarians' jobs were to know exactly what information was, where it could be located, how it could be obtained, who had written it, what the provenance of the information was, whether it was accurate. That librarianship practice then poured onto the internet in the form of all the work that was done to organize documents and produce standards for things like search data when we moved onto the web. And that bedrock of librarianship and all the statistical modeling which was done of information as a way of doing things like internet search, all of that stuff is why we now don't consider information to be scarce anymore. And anybody over the age of about probably 35 will remember information scarcity from the time when you had a question for your parents and they didn't know the answer and it wasn't in a book that was in your house and you were stuck unless you went to the library, and even then they might not know. And that period is completely gone. So we're in a position where we've got enormous scarcity of physical things, but we have managed over about 30 years to get rid of information scarcity. And we did it for a range of things, right? We started with text, then we did images, then we did sound, then we did short films, then we did long films, then we did radio. So to all intents and purposes, we just went category by category by category by category, eradicating information scarcity. So the next thing on the internet's list of things to do, and note that I say the internet and not the blockchain, is to do the same kind of eradication of scarcity for physical goods. Does anybody feel like they own too much stuff and it's poorly organized? Right? Does anybody feel like they've got total control of their physical environment, they don't have any stray matter that they really should have gotten rid of and haven't? Yeah, I thought so, right? So we're in a culture where we've got this enormous glut produced by industrial mass production. There's a kind of unstructured river of stuff coming out of factories, and that river of stuff was driven by the creation of things like total quality management, and before that, specialization of labor on production lines. So we built an enormous production machine that was based on scientific reasoning about how to make production more efficient. Over the past 50 years, we did something very similar for investment. We did quantitative finance, we did portfolio theory. We basically went through and we applied math and sort of scientific methods and rationales to investment and to production. The consumption and the waste functions in society haven't been touched at all. Consumption is basically an analog swamp where an object that was conceived of on a computer, managed in an ERP system, financed by a hedge fund that was using algorithms to figure out where they were going to put the money, right? You walk into a shop, you pay for it with a digital card, which is, processing payments through an OLTP system, and then as soon as you take the thing home, it completely loses its digital identity. We have no idea what it is or where it came from other than what happens to be printed on the side of the box. And if you want to resell the thing, you have to go through all of the labor of redefining what it is when you type the information into eBay before you can pass it on to another seller. This is happening because we don't have stable identities for physical things. Physical things have a stable identity through the investment system and through the production system. When they go into the consumption system and the waste system, they have no stable identity. They're essentially anonymous trash as soon as you buy it. And this is why after you buy something, it's worth 50 or 80% less than you paid for it. As soon as you walk out of the shop, it basically becomes separated, its digital identity is removed and thrown away because the retailer is no longer maintaining it and the manufacturer is no longer maintaining it, and you just walk out of the shop with a piece of trash. And you use it as long as you use it, and then it goes straight into landfill. So what that's creating is an enormous mismatch between the production systems and the consumption systems, an enormous river of goods which are being junked when they're perfectly usable if we could only identify what they were, and an enormous loss of money to consumers, right? Because everybody is in a position where the things that they want typically last longer than our desire for them, right? Whether it's a suit or a car or a pair of shoes, in most cases, unless you're staying very close to classic design, you will buy something, it will be great for a while, then fashion will change, then you will want rid of it, right? But you can't get rid of it without taking a 50 or a 90% loss or just throwing it away. Your choices are you store it indefinitely in the back of a wardrobe, you give it to a charity shop, or you sell it on eBay, but even selling it on eBay requires a bunch of labor. So what this is creating is a cliff where new goods are up here, then there's a 50 to 90% drop, then there's a second-hand market. But we're in a world where there's actually a nearly infinite pool of unserved demand, right? There are plenty of poor people in this country, but there are another 3.5 billion poor people that still have market access in the developing world, and another 2 billion beyond that that are barely connected to the global market at all. So why is anything going to landfill when there are billions of people going without? And the answer is because we throw away all the information, so the objects become detached from their stories. We can't do search, we can't find marketplaces for these things. And so there's an enormous pile of stuff which is going to landfill rather than being reused till end of life. And if we fix that, we could keep most of the structure of a consumer society going, where goods are still, available for purchase and you can do what you like with them, as long as they go directly into efficient secondary markets, so the goods are in use by some human being right until the end of their life, the actual amount of environmental impact that you have by buying something is divided by all of the people that then subsequently use it. So what this provides is a possible avenue for us to radically cut our environmental impact at the same time as we rapidly increase our quality of life. less material clutter, higher quality goods, efficient secondary markets. You buy something, you use it until you're bored, you pass it on to somebody else, you recover most of the value that you paid for it, and you know that those things will be in use until they literally fall apart. And that creates the necessary economic incentives to do quality manufacturing of long-life, durable goods, because we get away from the idea that you basically just buy things and trash them, and we get into the idea that we have a kind of collective custodianship of the physical assets of the human race. So when we take resources out of nature and then manufacture things with them, we know that that object will be in use by some human being, mostly not us, right until it falls to pieces. And if you think about things like stainless steel or polypropylene, that could be hundreds of years. So that's what I think we should be working on in the blockchain space and on the internet space in general. We need something which is the equivalent of total quality control, which completely revolutionized mass production. We need an equivalent structure for consumption and waste management, and we need it now as a critical part of meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.